I need another sound, the sound that's gonna bring this into this century. I'd like to start with chords. A lot of times I like to hum along with it to kind of tell me, like, where does my gut take me? Once you add a bass line, that starts kind of taking you into maybe what the groove could be. If that piano continues on the whole time, we're gonna get bored by it very quickly. I always like to do drums last for the most part. You don't want too much going on before you write anything. If everything's moving around, it's gonna make every melody just kind of feel like you're competing with the track. What's up, guys? It's day one. You're gonna see me start digging into a song from scratch. A lot of times I'm in with a writer or an artist, but today it's just me by myself. So you're gonna see my process from inception of me just building from scratch and starting a song. So I'm just gonna be noodling through some ideas and trying to piece together at least enough of a composition up until a bridge where I feel like it's the time to write melodies to. And through that process, I'm gonna know when I feel like, okay, I feel like I have a song here and I'm really feeling something from it. So let's get started. So this is my template that I'm just kind of scrolling through to kind of remind myself where I may begin. I'd like to start with chords. I think chords are the best way to do it, and then you can go into a bass line after. Go to a piano sound, just kind of like a basic piano sound that I have in my template that I can kind of vibe with, and start trying to dial some chords in, and usually just kind of hit record. No tempo in mind yet. So I'll kind of just noodle around a little bit. And just keep gravitating towards these chords. You can either go that's a little more interesting. Want to resolve that better. So that's like part one. I think that chord progression would be one progression. So, and then I'm trying to figure out also while I'm playing these chords and you're going, trying to figure out what tempo I'm in. So I would just probably click around. There's phone apps you can get, but you could pretty much just, throw a click track on, which I have in my template, which is, click track in Pro Tools. And then I'll just hit record. And then so the last chord I think could be minor instead of major, and also it's too fast. But luckily, because of MIDI, you just record it. You have all your MIDI right there of what you just played. What I like to do when I'm playing piano is I don't like to just, you can do a quick quantize in Pro Tools and it will just put everything on the grid and you go, okay, great. Everything I played is perfect. It's right on the grid, but you lose a lot of the performance. And now you can see everything is just very, just has no life anymore. Without the quantizing, you have, you can actually hear the chords being hit like a human, where your fingers don't all hit the notes at the same time. So why would you want to lose that? So I always like to keep that. So what I like to do is I like to keep the MIDI in clip mode, which is over here. And I like to just, you hit tab to transient, and then you hit Control E, and that lets you make a chop. And I like to chop all of the notes so that I can keep the fronts of the notes all intact. So when I go back into your MIDI and you're looking, you can see the chords are still hitting when I hit them, but now they're falling more on the grid. So that way the timing is still there, but my feeling isn't lost. So this is the fun chopping process. But, you know, to me, chopping is like the biggest, most helpful thing as far as making sure your instrument layout is going to be tight and your song is going to be tight. So all that was just consolidating everything. Now see that chord right there, I want to change. When I hear that back, it bothers me every time. And, you know, I'm never looking for problems, but if a problem finds me, then I know I got to fix it. So now that I have the loop that I like, I'm going to duplicate it so I can kind of hear it flow into itself. And then maybe I want to dial in on just the actual sound of the piano. I may want to find a different piano sound, or it kind of has like a nice old school vibe to it. So I might keep it and then just start adding some effects to it. So there's a great plugin called RC20 that has some nice little warbling tools in there. You have a lot of different things here. I could just start going through some weird sounds in here just to try something new and say, okay, what's pad magic? So to me, the piano actually feels like that. That piano would probably make me be a little more curious about what was about to happen with that sound on it than just a plain old piano. I feel like I'm just sitting in a room listening to someone play piano, may not drag me in. But what that also does is it makes me realize I need another sound to kind of maybe be the secondary sound to this, and could maybe be the sound that's going to bring this into this century. I think like when you play a piano, you're not really dating the song to any time period, but at the same time, you're not showing anyone that, hey, this is modern, this is now, this is something you've never heard before. I'll probably keep that effect on, and I'll probably put a nice low pass on there. So this way, it's low pass is pretty much I'm taking all of the high frequencies and sweeping them down. And I'm just using a basic one that comes with Pro Tools, the EQ3 one band, where it's just very simple. And now I'm making the piano less harsh. So now I want to find a weird sound that I could maybe throw on top of the piano. So I have some weird synth sounds in here that I could look at. And these are all just synths that I've kind of put into my template to maybe hope jumpstart an idea. So let me see what... It's interesting. I mean, there's a little arpeggiation going on. Let's see what else. So these are all pretty dancey as well. So those are not really ones that I think are going to blend well into this. Let me try a more laid back, less invasive sound. I like these old school ARP. All these are very, very loud. There's something. So that one seems like a potential start. You can add a little reverb to it. Someone kind of gives me like a nice little 80s vibe. So that part in the end, the piano wasn't still playing at the end, but I'm just working out that melody part. But I think the end part feels right. A lot of times I like to hum along with it. I feel like that's actually the best way to do it, because I think when you're playing, you're kind of at the mercy of how well you know the piano, or how well you know where all the chords you hear in your head are, and you may not be singing the best melody. You may be playing just what you're physically capable of, but there may be a better melody in there. So a lot of times I hum to kind of tell me, like, where does my gut take me? So now I'm taking what I just played, chopping it just like I did with the piano so that I can hear it on top of the progression. I think for now it's just building sounds until you feel like you have something that is inspiring enough to write to. So right now it's like I hear piano, I hear a synth, and I'm kind of don't really know where it's going yet, but I think it still needs a little more. I think I would like to add more bottom end. I think once you add like a bass line, I feel like that starts kind of take you into maybe what the groove could be. I always like to do drums last for the most part, just because you could write an entire song with no drums. So I feel like adding an element that may not be needed may be unnecessary, and you'll be spending time on something that you might even want to go back and change after. So right now you're listening to a piano and like an 80s synth sound. It's kind of keeping you maybe in like a hypnotic state, but at least it might make you start hearing a story, like what are these chords saying? So now next I want to add a bass sound in here. So just to remind myself of my progression. So now I know my progression, just to remind myself, G sharp, you could see the MIDI here. So now that I know my bass line, I can now try to play around and create a few bass lines that might feel natural. So I'm going to just start it from the top. So that's like a simple bass line, but it'll be effective just because you don't want too much going on while you're listening back to all the sounds before you write anything, just because if everything's moving around, it's going to make every melody or lyric idea just kind of feel like you're competing with the track, and you kind of want to keep things as minimal as possible as long as you can. So now I'm just chopping this up so that the bass line is nice and in sync with the track. Right now I'm using the Sonic Academy Anna sound for the bass. And now that I've dialed in on a bass sound that I like, now I'm just going to kind of EQ it a little bit, take a little bit of the high end out of it. So if you hear this play out from the top, just to hear it back and see how the vibe feels. So luckily, because everything is in MIDI still, I could still go and change any progression, any sound, anything I'm hearing. So when I hear it back, I kind of want to change the one little part of this synth pattern. So when I play it back, I like a da-na-na-na. So I'll just move this over here just to change that. So I'll move these two over. So that feels better to me. It gives that melody line a little bit more life to it, so it's not just going bum 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 dun 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 dun. Just kind of gives it a little more action, a little more excitement. So now that we have that, these are just markers in the top that I have in a template, just to show you, like, intro, verse, chorus. So this way I kind of put little markers in the top just to kind of show where every 4 bars, every 8 bars goes, just for eyesight purposes. So I can kind of see, okay, I have, 4 bars here, 4 bars there. And I can also sequence things a little easier. So now, first 4 bars, just piano. I may want to make the first two piano, bring in the synth, and then bring in the bass after that. So I'm going to shorten the amount of time it takes for it to get to the next sound. So now that we've heard the piano so much, either we're going to keep the piano going, or we'll try to find another instrument that could maybe be the verse. Like right now, I'm also in my head, I'm trying to figure out, what is this? Is this the intro that comes in, then a chorus comes in, then we're going into a verse? So I'm always figuring out arrangement-wise kind of while I'm creating a little bit, just because it will help me decide which instruments I need to start really dialing in on. And I think it also helps you unfold the story musically rather than you just having a bunch of random sounds and not even knowing where to begin. I think finding that starting point is very key. So this feels like an intro to me. And just for the sake of listening back, I may just do a little sweep so that as it's coming in, it's starting off a little more low passed, and then you're eventually hearing more of the highs for the piano. So it feels like more of a cinematic entrance. So now it feels like I want to hear the piano come again, not the pad. I feel like the pad is just like a special part, kind of a melodic phrase that when you hear that, you kind of go, okay, I think I can hear the identity of this. This is something that might be catchy, something that I might want to hum, not just piano chords that you can't really hum. But now for the verse, I want to differentiate this. I feel like I may not want those top notes in the chord because they might feel a little too busy. So I might want to hear what it sounds like without those top notes in there. So I might just erase them. So we're coming out of the chorus going into the potential verse. So you're kind of, now you're letting it kind of bake. You're kind of letting it just ease in rather than just going right into a verse super strong. But I think because it's so bare now, you may want to add another sound right in the top of the verse just to give it a little more interesting, some more interesting elements that could suck you in during the verse. So now I may just look through some other sounds and see what I might have. Maybe I'll try to find an arpeggiator, which is a sound that just kind of plays chords through. You play a chord and it kind of just, well, you'll hold a chord down, and let me just open it. Usually this program called Nexus, great synth that I have, that I like, just has so many different options in it, but it's great with arpeggiators. So I may just see what I have in here for arpeggiators and just start. I want to find something that I can. It's all right. So now also when you hear it, everything is so fast because right now the BPM I have on double time. So what I'll do is I'll go into this and change this to eighth note arpeggiator so I can kind of. So now I can play the chords that are there, and you'll have an arpeggiated synth. Right? So what you can do, if you don't feel like playing the chords, it just depends on how you want to keep the inversions. You can copy your MIDI, put it down onto this arpeggiator, and then when you go into the sound, what you want to do is make sure, this is so you know you've nailed the exact way you've played the piano when you're matching the arpeggiator. So what I'm going to do is delete all these extra notes and just leave the chords that I played. And now while this happens, now these are just the chords. And for this, I like to quantize arpeggiators. It's not like a piano where it needs to sound like a real piano. You're talking about a synth. So with a sound like that, you'll quantize it so everything is perfectly on the grid so the arpeggiator will stay on beat the whole time. So now what I'm doing is editing the MIDI here so that I can extend all these sounds out and the arpeggiator will resonate through the whole chord for each line. So now I'm just going to move these all over. There's little quicker shortcut keys here. So I'm just going to select all this and then move it all over. Grab this, move this over. Put this here. So then that went there. That's there. This is here. Okay, move all this out. Yeah. So now when we listen back, there may be low notes in there. I'm going to listen to it solo just so I can kind of hear. Move it up an octave. Don't need that. I like to take the bottom note out of an arpeggiator so that way you leave room for the bass and any bottom end. So now I still may want to move it up an octave, so that's what I'll do. So on this one, I might just keep this one exactly the same the second time through. So what I'm going to do is make sure that these are all extended out to the end of the bar so that there's no stopping. And so now when you're hearing it, it's going the whole way through. And now you can hear it with the piano. I'm going to move these over to the verse. And I'm going to take my sound and move it up because I like to keep everything all together so I can kind of see what we have for instruments. So now you can see your arrangement much easier when all the sounds are next to each other. A session can get really bogged down when you have too many things happening. So coming out of this chorus, let's hear what it would sound like going into the arpeggiator and the more broken down piano, which I'll color code now so you can kind of see that it's a different part. So now what I'm hearing is you probably don't even need these broken down pianos anymore. They were just there to kind of keep the vibe of what was happening in the chorus just so you kind of hear where it would go. But now I can delete that. Or I can just mute it just in case we ever need it again. I don't like to ever delete things. But so now coming out of this chorus, going into just an arpeggiator now feels like a totally new vibe. It makes it feel a little more modernized. So may not even need the piano to come in there. So I think that's another place where now, just to lift it up in the second half of the verse, make it a little more interesting, I may want to find another sound, maybe a pad or something to kind of support that arpeggiator. And now the piano is starting to feel to me when I hear it, it's just an additional element. It's the thing you lead the song in. And it's that organic element on the hook to make you feel like, okay, there's a story here. But during the verses, I kind of want it to switch because I feel like if that piano continues on the whole time, we're going to get bored by it very quickly. So that's what I'm wrestling with now and trying to figure out where a nice, comfortable place is. What's going to be that main featured instrument and what's the identity of the song starting to turn into. So now I'm looking through some sounds that I have in here and pulling up a Juno. And there's a nice pad in there. So that feels like a nice vibe. So let me try playing the chords, but not the full version. A lot of times when you have a verse and you want the chords to feel like they're not as energetic as the chorus is, you don't have to necessarily change the progression, but maybe you want to play the chords a little less cumbersome so there's just less notes in each chord. So instead of playing this full A flat major into the B flat minor into the F minor, you might just cut out that top note. So based on the progression, it'd be C minor there. So now that element, just adding those two notes, I think adds such a nice texture to the whole progression and gives us more stuff to play with and figure out where we can put certain things. So now I'm just doing my chopping. I don't want to do the full quantizing. I still like to keep the realness of it. You know, I like to keep the attack on all the notes. So that's a nice Juno. This is just the part that was just played. I'm going to move it up to the progression. So now, because that's so mellow and not too energetic, that may be a better way to lead the verse in, but may not be. I have to hear it. So a lot of times when you're trying to make these decisions, you can't just go right into it. Sometimes you have to give yourself a little bit of lead up to it, a little bit of momentum to know where you're at in the song. So right now I'm going to try muting just the arpeggiator on the top of where I think the verse is and start from the last 4 bars of the chorus and see how it feels going into just that Juno part with the 2 notes. So far it feels really good, and I think the next step would be you'd go and start humming some melodies on top and seeing what comes out and then taking it from there.